Welcome back to Jay's Flicks. I'm your host, Jane, and today we're going to be talking about the latest 2025 sports horror film, Him, directed by Justin Tipping, produced by Jordan Peele, and starring Marlon Wayans and Tyreek Withers. This movie released on Friday, September 19th. And I had a chance to go watch it, and I'm going to tell you guys what I think about it. Wasn't the biggest fan of it, and I was maybe I put too much hype into it, it was overhyped, and when I first saw the trailer months ago, I thought, oh man, this is interesting, a horror film, you know, that is mixed with sports, with football in particular, which is my favorite sport. So I thought it would be very interesting to watch it. And I can say coming out of the theater, I wasn't too impressed. So I'm gonna tell you guys what I thought about it and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, make sure you guys subscribe to us here on Jay Swix. I know it's been a while since I posted on this channel, and I'm going to start posting more because I got a lot more things that I want to review for you guys that I have seen recently. Things like My Life with the Walter Boys, Summer I Turned Pretty, um, like all these sorts of things, and there's more that I need to watch and review for y'all. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna try to be consistent with that, stay on top of that, right? For Jay's Flicks. So I love doing this. I love watching movies. I love watching shows. It's fun, and it's cool to talk about it and break it down and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button here, share it with your friends, all that, and let's get started. So him, like I said, this movie has been in the works for a couple years now. Jordan Peele, who's known for his work directing Get Out, Us, Nope, right? All three films of his that did pretty well in the box office. Well, Nope didn't do that well, but that's a conversation for another podcast. And Get Out was really good. Us was really good. He also produced Candyman, was a 2021 film. Although it was directed by Nia DaCosta, he produced it, and Jordan Peele produced this film. But this was directed by Justin Tipping, who recently he directed films like Kicks. I didn't see that movie, and I wasn't familiar with his other work. So this was his big break for movies as far as directing, and I think see this movie benefited from marketing because they marketed this as a Jordan Peele movie, and it wasn't. Like it's like, hey, from the minds of Jordan Peele, or um, produced by Jordan Peele. Like people saw Jordan Peele, they forget they didn't even pay attention to the produced part. They're paying attention to Jordan Peele, and then you go into this movie with these high expectations, and it just did not hit them. It did not meet these expectations. I mean, so basically, what the movie is about is this up and coming football prospect quarterback named Cameron. He suffers a severe injury, right? And he's supposed to be the next big thing, So he was about to do the combine, but he got injured, and so he ends up getting the chance to train for his favorite player of all time, someone considered a GOAT in this football universe, Isaiah White, who was played by Marlon Wayans. And Marlon Wayans did an amazing job with his character. You could feel the psychoticness and the craziness, and he played the villain really well in this movie, but also able to switch between the personalities, between being chill and funny, and then being just absolutely terrifying, right? To a degree. And he did a great job. And Tyreek Withers did an amazing job as well playing Cameron, in this movie. But and it follows him training at this compound with Isaiah. It's in the middle of nowhere, and as time goes on, weird things start happening, right? And Cam starts to realize that this may not be what it all is hyped up to be, right? So that's basically the gist of the movie, and throughout the film, I could say the cinematography on this movie was excellent, right? I mean, the visuals were very stunning, the lights, the camera work, the placement, how it was viewing from different angles, all the wide shots, the close-ups. You could really tell that they put an emphasis on those specific parts of the film to engage the audience more, to make it feel like you're actually there at this compound, and to make the scenes feel immersive. I could definitely credit the movie on that part. They did a great job with that. There was certain scenes where you feel like it was just done so visually well. Like it made the scene that much more powerful than it probably should have been. Like I think about a particular scene where Cam is in a bathtub, and it's like in the middle of this empty room. He's in a cold tub, soaking, and the lights go out. And then it's like you do a close up shot of him And there's a shot where he goes down deeper into the water, and then it's like all these flashes of different things, and so that's just one scene out of many. But like I said, aesthetically, this movie was very pleasing to look at. However, when you get into the storytelling aspect, that's where things start to fall off, and I feel like the story that they were going for in this movie was a good premise. It was a good premise. It was a good idea. It just didn't capitalize. And mind you, guys, the movie was only an hour and like 36 minutes long. So they really rushed this plot. And I feel like if it was just a tad bit longer, maybe hour and 45 minutes, well, I'll say about, yeah, close to 2 hours, hour 55 minutes, I think it could have done well, something like that in that range. I think it definitely could have did well with that, because the story that they were trying to tell to the audience, just you couldn't fit it in that runtime. That you just couldn't fit it in that specific runtime that they had, and you felt like the minute from the beginning where we first meet Cam, and then he's at the combine, and then he's not so long after that he's at the house with Isaiah, and it just felt like everything was rushed. And that's the one thing I didn't like about it. It wasn't scary, and like I do wish, like, when people make these horror movies and they label it as a horror, like I feel like that's just it is a marketing ploy. Like this might have been this might have better been labeled as a psychological thriller than a horror film, because it was marketed as a horror film, and it just it isn't scary. Yeah, there's your typical jump scares. I mean, but it doesn't hit like really scary. Like it doesn't give me that. There's not many parts where I was genuinely terrified, or worried about our main character and what he might face, in this situation, in this particular setting. And that's one of the things I could say about this movie. Like I just couldn't, I wasn't scared. If anything, it was more funny than it was scary, And I saw this with my friends Friday night, and they were saying something like, "Yeah, if anything, like this was, I mean, more comedic than it was scary. I mean, you had your parts that definitely belong with a thriller, and the score, the music score, definitely had that ominous vibe to it in certain parts of the movie, especially when you get into the second act, you know. But other than that, it just this movie didn't do much for me. I think they really relied heavily on the comedic prospect of Marlon Wayans, and his deliveries with his lines. And I mean, some of the body gore was all right. The body gore was good. Things like that. But just dialogue was okay. I just honestly, I rated this movie at like a 6 out of 10, being generous, a 6.5. It just didn't do much, And I think again, it could have benefited from a longer runtime and also just more emphasis put on the story. A lot of people that are reviewing this are talking about style over substance for this movie, and I agree in certain degrees. Like there was a lot of style as far as like again being visually pleasing. The cinematography was great, the camera work was great. All of those things made this movie like you felt like you were there. That's like one of the things I can say about it. Like those are praises that I have about it. But when it came to things like, again, just the script, it just was lacking a lot. It felt dry. The story felt dry. The narrative, what they're trying to tell, and there is of course messaging. There's symbolism in this movie, as usually there are with these types of films. And if you're a sports person, then you understand that on a deeper level. If you've played sports, if you played football in particular, then you understand like how the pressure that these athletes put themselves under to reach success, and how it's like, you will do whatever it takes to reach the highest level, the pinnacle level, which is the NFL. If you're playing football, the NBA if you're playing basketball, but for this particular instance, for football, and Cameron Cade here, he's willing to do whatever it takes to reach the NFL, right? And that's what Isaiah is trying to pull at him, trying to get him to understand, trying to involve him in this sort of cult in a way, and it's really like, you know that leaves room for so much potential, like so much potential for it, and like they did a good job of kind of opening that lane up, but then they abandoned it in a way. They abandoned it in a way, and it just didn't come back to that part. And you get to the very end of the movie, and that came out of complete nowhere, right? And so I'm watching that ending scene and I'm like, wait, if they would have done that earlier in the movie, it probably would have worked, right? But a lot of people were saying they love this movie. Again, it's not a horrible movie. I mean, it's not the worst horror movie I've ever seen. Like I could probably say that belongs to The Strangers, Chapter Two of the 2024 version. The 2024 Strangers movie was really bad. That was not a good horror movie. But this one was okay. It was like I said, I give it a 6 out of 10. Like 6 to 6.5 out of 10. It wasn't bad. Like I said, the acting was good. The casting was well done for the most part. I just felt like they just relied too much heavily, on their leads to carry the film, as opposed to the actual groundwork and the story developing within that. But all that being said, if you guys want to know if you should go watch him, I say if you want to form your own opinion, go watch it. It's not a horrible watch. Like I said, it's entertaining. If you like Marlon Wayans, and you'll like him in this film. It's probably one of his best performances in a movie in a while. He really killed this role, along with, I guess, like I said, Tyreek Withers, who played the main character here, Cameron. He was great. Also, fun fact: he used to play football. Played in high school. Played receiver at FSU for a year. So he is familiar with football a little bit. He's been trained with Jordan Palmer, who was a quarterback trainer, worked with Joe Burrow and Josh Allen in the NFL. So, he really wants to capture that quarterback role. And I think he did a good job, as far as with the physical scenes, with the football scenes, things like that, throwing the football around. So he did a good job. I applaud him on his performance in this film, him and Marlon Wayans. Julia Fox also was she was good in her limited action in the movie as well. So, like I said, you guys, go watch it if you want, but if you don't, then don't. I mean, it's skippable for sure. Out of all the horror movies of 2025, I'd say this one's on the lower tier for me. And you still got movies coming up like The Black Phone 2 and, things like that. Good Boy is another one coming up. So, just this one is skippable, but that's my take on it. So, thank you guys for watching this episode of Jay's Flicks. We'll see you next time on the show. Have a good day.